The role of businesses in society's obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights and fundamental freedom is one that has not been given adequate attention over the years. Business and human rights have not been closely related. This is what led to the unanimous endorsement of the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights by the United Nations Human Rights Council on 16 June 2011. Ghana, as a member of the global body, has an obligation to develop a national action plan on business and human rights. As part of plans to ensure the successful implementation of this action plan, the steering committee has been embarking on a series of stakeholder engagements across all 16 regions of the country.
The National Action Plan on Business Human Rights is very key to the nation's human rights effort. And indeed, I must indicate that its origins are traced way back to 2017 and during the nation's UPR assessment in Geneva. Every 4 years, every nation submits itself to the determination of the international community as to its compliance with its human rights obligations. And the 2017 cycle, one of the feedback from the international community was that the nation had to do a lot more when it comes to business and human rights. Following that, there was a baseline assessment report undertaken by the government of Ghana. The baseline assessment report also came out with the level of compliance by various entities with regards to human rights obligations. Then the Attorney General, myself, set up a steering committee to work towards the development of the National Action Plan on Human Rights. The National Action Plan on Human Rights for me is very key, but to set out the pillars for ensuring compliance by business entities with their human rights obligations. And for me, the recognition of human rights by businesses is key to the development of the country. In my view, indeed, it is part of corporate responsibility of businesses. Every business ought to regard as part of its corporate responsibility the compliance with human rights obligations. There's a need for every entity to ensure that it does not unnecessarily violate the rights of businesses, the rights of workers which work with the business, and then also limit the effect of its activities on the environment. And as I said, businesses always seek to do business, and for that matter, profit making is their objective. But the extent to which they do so and the effect of that activity on the environment depends on the regulation by the state. So if the state indeed sets up mechanisms which will properly regulate activities of business entities in the country, it will ultimately also have an effect on mitigating the disastrous effect of businesses on the environment in which they work. And that for me is the ultimate effect. So apart from ensuring that the rights of workers and the rights of communities are protected, ultimately the right to the environment in which the right to preserve a sound environment in which we live is also one of the key pillars of the National Action Plan for Human Rights.
So the responsibility of businesses to respect human rights actually came into fruition in 2011, whereas principles allowed for every country to put those principles into the context of its peculiar circumstances. And in 2017, when Ghana was reviewed by its peers at the UN, one of the major considerations of the peers of Ghana needs to put in place a National Action Plan on business and human rights.
What is happening is they are encroaching on other people's land. Because if you look at the demarcation well, the building in question has even crossed its boundaries. And now they are encroaching on other people's lands.
And now, no say one young information said different say only the English be or a station into a bar. Into me now, Paul, you have one of our manager or station. See, also frame say, Sana, I didn't see any of my friend. I don't also say, what is the early at the morning. And now, I'm mobile. And to me, my call crowd, I'm mobile now, Miss Muir, because the Ejima company, beginning I supposed to follow my bosses. You get my point. And I'm mobile and follow them say, okay, yeah, Paul. Yeah, Paul, you're okay. Let me see you. No, no, you do one more. I'm demolition. And now, your manager will be so say that one or so then I see you are. And I'm feeling. You got my point. I'm feeling. And now you're one of our boss. And I'm also buying. I'm also buying Nana. I'm saying I'm also buying our partner car. Oh, the same junction. So, and now, like I don't know, police for any SWAT for, and some people I don't know them. But people are friends say father. Meaning by I say a friend father, son a friend. I'm go operation. And now. Yeah, boss some say one or so man say no more operation. Wow, nti yenim nti omukasa na omu say mu tuka e frequency say na be ya e bia be nya kwan na akọ ono so say dey be because no onim for na so ma omu nti mo say hu one or so ma omu nti omu be say mo attack no e na me so no make nobody touch our boss asemi no me kan no and they started beating me, give me blows, and I don't know, slap me.
And so, being the National Human Rights Institution of Ghana, we thought it very, very necessary to come in and support the state of Ghana to have the framework in place. And so that is when we started the process of engaging with academia, particularly through the GIMPA, and later on with the support of the Danish Institute for Human Rights. They gave us funding support, and then the national baseline assessment was done. Having done the baseline assessment, we took over everything from GIMPA as a commission and began to drive the process. But we are mindful that the state represented in this context by the Attorney General is the body that has a duty to take it forward as executive. But we would complement their support. And so we went ahead, had the baseline assessment validated, adopted, and between the Attorney General and myself as co-chairs, we were able to put in place a steering committee, multi-sectoral steering committee that way. But that was now to develop the National Action Plan. The 18-member committee was able to use a human rights-based approach because it's about human rights. So very participatory, went through all the regions, were able to take inputs from almost everybody who mattered. We're talking about state agencies, private sector, public sector, civil society, and even specific bodies like disability, women, youth, and so many people to inform the outcome of the action plan as a fully rounded framework. So we've done that. Now, the process has been validated in terms of the action planning, and we're hoping that with final input that is yet to be made, this document will now be printed and launched, and after that, we'll take the adoption processes in consultation with the Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Justice, to see to what extent which options will be adopted and will be used to adopt the plan as a national policy. Now, after the national policy adoption, the Commission would fall back to its next steps role, which is monitoring the implementation of the plan. We are in the plan, the monitoring agency of the action plan. And the monitoring will lead to a number of things. Indeed, there's a business and human rights unit that is formed under the plan. So the Commission, and working through that business and human rights unit, which will be the secretariat to the plan, the implementation of the plan, will now take on board those critical aspects that we intend to perform. One, educating the public. The public need to know what is in the plan in terms of business impacts on human rights of diverse areas. I'm talking about manufacturing, mining, trade union activities, commerce, everywhere, in fact, every sector of the economy where business impacts on human rights and adverse impacts like that are possible. We will ensure that we educate people to that extent. Businesses, individuals, academia, private and public sector, civil society, broadly speaking. After that, we will be in a position to also generate reports. We'll be doing that as a BONICOM. The National Development Planning Commission, the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, the Ghana Statistical Service are the bodies that will form the MONICOM, among others. These are the critical bodies.
Businesses, irrespective of their sizes, have an obligation to respect human rights in their value chain. In order to achieve this, there is a need for strong collaborative efforts and support to ensure that the guiding principles as unanimously adopted are adhered to. Ghana, in its quest to develop a national action plan, has received some remarkable support from a number of development partners.
Oxfam's mission in Ghana is hinged around fighting inequalities and unaccountable power that violates human rights and perpetuates poverty and injustice, as well as environmental destruction. One of our main approaches is through human rights-based approaches towards development. So that is why we found it expedient to support the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice to develop a policy framework around business and human rights that will ensure that the state, as part of its obligation, ensure that there is protection for the human rights of people. Secondly, we also believe that people and businesses must do business, but should be mindful of their human rights obligations and respecting the human rights of people and communities where they are doing their businesses. And where there are violations, companies or businesses together with the state must work together to find remedy to these violations that happen. And that is why we as Oxfam is supporting the Commission for Human Rights to come out with a National Business and Human Rights Action Plan that we hope will provide the policy framework and the space for businesses to do their business without compromising on the human rights of communities and people where they are doing their businesses.
Playing this role, like reducing poverty, dealing with climate change, reducing social exclusion and all, they can have some negative impact on the communities we serve. And this National Action Plan will provide the framework where these issues can be dealt with. This is the main reason why UNDP provided support for the development of the action plan, so that as businesses promote human rights, they would also prevent the abuse of rights.
In 2022, the Frederick Shift Tank, through its regional projects on employment generation in Africa, learning from good practices, highlighted the high level of precarity on Africa's employment landscape through research that was conducted in 6 African countries, that is Benin, Madagascar, Ethiopia, Rwanda, South Africa, and Ghana. Yet there was little enforcement of existing laws to protect human rights in business. Therefore, we found the effort by SHRAJ and Attorney General to come up with a national action plan on business and human rights in Ghana as great, as most African countries hadn't come up with a national action plan on business and human rights that will by and large ensure that there's sanity on Africa's labor market or Africa's employment landscape. Therefore, we gave our support to the process, and so far we are glad to know that the voices of the vulnerable are adequately heard and provided for in the National Action Plan, as large stakeholder consultations have taken place in Ghana to ensure that strategies to come up with or strategies to protect, respect, and remedy human rights in business are inclusively done.
ActionAid Ghana is a member of an affiliate of the ActionAid Federation. We have been working with the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General Department, as well as the Commission on Human Rights and Restorative Justice, to be able to develop the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. It is expected that this strong collaboration would develop the plan in a way that will ensure that communities have their rights guaranteed and secured as far as business and human rights development in Ghana is concerned. And that government will use policy instruments to ensure that multinational companies do not exploit our communities and utilize smallholder women farmers in Ghana as far as development is concerned.
The stakeholder consultations held across the regions of the country received a lot of patronage from citizens, including politicians, judges, civil servants, business persons, among many others.
The resolution was supported by all governments across the world, including our dear country, Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, the main purpose of this is to advance the protection, respect, and redress of human rights violations.
The more business we have, the more competitive the labor market will be, and the more our human rights framework will also be competitive.
All persons have rights, and these rights must be respected by all, including businesses. Everybody who is providing some form of service must do so, mindful of the rights of their clients or customers.
Based on the recommendations coming from the UN and all the other protocols we have ratified and signed on to, we will continue to expand. And so when you feel that your right has been violated, here you can actually go to court, or you can come to SHRAJ. And I want to say that the services of SHRAJ are free. You don't pay a dime to access the services of SHRAJ. And whatever complaint you have, you lodge it, we investigate and make the necessary recommendations to deal with that.
So when it comes to persons with disabilities, issues around accessibility, reasonable accommodation are key things that exclude them. And so I'm just wondering how the action plan will support businesses to first know of how or where to even get some sort of support if needed. Thank you.
Yes, it would be reasonably detailed. Be detailed enough to create obligations and expectations in respect of milestones. But as far as the key or broader, more detailed benchmarks, there may need to be additional post and NAP activities and post NAP consultations to ensure this happens for particular stakeholders. So for disability, for gender, for children, for a couple of other sort of key vulnerable groups, we would have to go into more detail than what you're going to provide in the NAP. because their situations are particularly bad when it comes to the business environment.
Patients have rights. They have rights just as any other individual who is in Ghana and are covered by the Bill of Rights that are given to us and are enshrined in our constitution. But when they come to the hospital, we also have what we call the Patient's Charter that also provides it defines what patients can do and their responsibilities.
It is the expectation of all stakeholders that Ghana's National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, once adopted, will engender a paradigm shift towards doing business. Taking cognizance of the human rights obligations placed on the state and business enterprises where violations occur will be adequate and effective remedy.
In the light of what other countries have gone through, so that Ghana will be able to, on its own, not only build a robust national action plan, but build the best in Africa and even in the world.